Do you need encouragement to turn tragedies into your own triumphant life story? If so, this podcast is for you. Listen to powerful guests who have persevered through challenges so you can gain strength to build your championship life. The host of Professor of Perseverance podcast, Dr. James Purdue.
Hey, come on in again today, and thank you for showing up for the Professor of Perseverance podcast. I am Dr. James Purdue, the Professor of Perseverance. And so today's topic, we're here to help inspire, motivate, educate, encourage, and provide hope for people that are struggling over whatever. The topic is our guest. She, 30 years ago, was in a battered women's shelter 3 times with her 3 little ones, her 3 babies, her 3 children. And that experience has led her to her life's work. That's what I'm talking about. Let's take this tragedy and let's get past it and let's use it to help other people. Today, our guest is Debbie Godfrey. Thank you for being here, Debbie.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it, and I'm excited to share my story.
We're excited to hear from you. So I talked to you briefly before we got on. I've only experienced one personally, not me, but knowing a family that was in a shelter like you're talking about. And not to have to get so much in detail of that, but I've only experienced one time. So hearing this is going to help me be aware of things as well. So if you want to hop in, just tell us how the story goes, and we'll move on from there.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, it was 30 years ago, which seems like forever. And I found myself.
My grandfather would go many moons ago.
Many moons ago, that's right.
Back in 1983. That's how my grandfather would do it. All right, go ahead.
That's pretty close. Actually, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I was married. I had 3 very small children, and I was very young as well. I think I was probably 25 or 26 by the time I had 3 kids. And I was experiencing some pretty harsh stuff in my relationship. My now ex-husband, of course, would, chase me, yell at me, call me names. Occasionally would kick me in the head, kick me other places. He was pretty devious. And most of it, I feel like, was what I later learned is called domestic terrorism, which they're using in a different term now, but that term is also used in the literature around domestic violence. There's a difference between common couple violence, which is both people being a little nutty and violent, and then domestic terrorism, which is where it's really one-sided. And this definitely was, a perpetrator and a victim type of situation. Yes. Much bigger, stronger. And I had 3 little kids and I'm not a fighter.
Yes. Oh, so you're the old thing that they used to talk about boxing. I'm not a fighter, I'm a lover. There you go.
There you go. That's not to say I don't have my mischief. And there was definitely things because I was in this process of leaving for a year. As you described, I was in that shelter 3 different times, leaving and coming back and leaving and coming back. And in therapy that time and learning some of the things that I did and that battered women do to actually set off the violence. There's a violence cycle that happens where there's tension that builds, tension that builds, tension that builds. And usually the woman will actually set off the violent incident because that tension is so uncomfortable and so hard to deal with. And once you have a violent episode, it then goes into this honeymoon phase. Usually the dude's remorseful and then it's all lovey-dovey and you think everything is good. And then it just keeps going around in this cycle. And so part of my awareness was learning the things that I did. Like I distinctly remember one time we were in the middle of this, tension building phase. And this is hindsight. I wasn't thinking it at the time, but I just there was an ashtray on the counter and I just swiped it off the sink, like knowing that was going to really piss him off.
Yeah, triggering. Yes.
And of course it set it off. You have the incident, and then you get back to the honeymoon phase again. And so there was a lot of learning involved. But basically, the first time before I went into shelter, it was a series of really serendipitous kind of events, and I was experiencing a lot of things. I was young. I'm pretty well educated. I mean, I have a bachelor's. I was majoring in biochemistry way back then. So, I mean, I'm fairly intelligent. I'm not your typically what people would see as a battered woman, but I was in a situation, like where I just felt like I couldn't get away from it, with 3 kids and just too young. And so I read there was an article in the paper about domestic violence or something like that. And this is, like I said, this is 30 years ago. So this is pre-OJ, which I see there was a real distinct difference that happened after the whole OJ thing with public awareness around domestic violence. But this was before that. And so I read this article and I saved the number. Like somehow something that I read in that article, I was relating to my own experience without really understanding it. And over that holiday season, we had a big fight, and he kicked me out of the house, and I had to walk like in the dark, in the rain, to the gas station. And I actually called the 800 number for the first time from a gas station. And that's when my life actually started to change, because the person on the other end knew what to say and how to help and what to do. And I wasn't ready to leave at that time. It was holiday and all this, but she helped me make a plan. And so I had a plan, and like a few days into the new year, I packed us all up and we went into shelter. And the counselors helped with figuring all that out and everything. And that started this journey. And I stayed in for 1 month, which is the time you stay in the first time. And I read the book, I think it's called The Battered Women by Lenora Walker. It's a famous classic work about battered women. And it says, battered women take 3 to 7 times leaving before they leave. And of course, I'm straight A student. Like, I'm going to make it the first time. Yep. And I didn't. I failed. Between finances and his remorse and blah, 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 I wound up back with him again very shortly thereafter. Then in April of that year, same thing, had to get out, went into shelter again this time for 2 weeks. Came out, and he actually started doing some counseling and all this. So this time I did go back to him again. We had like a little grace period for 5 or 6 months. And then in August of that year, it blew up again. I left. I was in the shelter 3 days, had a much more solid plan that time. And that's when I left for good. And so that was my journey. That's what it took. The process was super painful, super traumatic, for myself and my kids. It didn't end there. It was many years of tough times. The court systems were much different then. At the time, they separated domestic violence from the kid violence. Now they know in the literature, and the story you were telling me before, there is no only abusing the woman. Like, in abusing the woman, the kids are being abused, whether or not the person physically accosts them or not. They're being abused by watching their mother be victimized.
Oh yeah, I believe that. Yes, like they're hearing it, they're experiencing the emotions, they're witnessing. Yeah, watching, like you said, they don't have to be physically abused. Yeah, there's many more abuse that goes along with that mentally. And so, yeah, I truly believe that. Yes.
Yeah. So he was affected, and as were my children. But back then they separated it. So basically it was really nutty. I have to tell you that at one point the judge gave the kids the house. And so when I had them in my custody, I would be at the house. And then when it was his turn, he would come to the house and I would need to leave. And then he would stay in the house with the kids. And every time we had that exchange, I'd have to call the police. I mean, literally, he would come to get the kids and he would trap me in the house and start doing something. And I'd have to call them. It was ridiculous. So it was a long, rough journey. And
I would have think that would have been in the court order anyway, to prevent any violence, that the police would have to be there to witness whoever's leaving that there's nothing going on. I would
Yeah,
have thought they would have been there anyway. I wouldn't think you would have had to call the police.
yeah.
So,
No, this was earlier on,
of course,
and
again, you're talking 30 years ago. Yes.
right. And I'm talking pre-OJ, and that's why my story changed once the whole OJ thing happened. I actually got a call from probation. This is like 2 years later. I'm moved on. You know, we are doing custody and still having things like, can we help you? Like, I'm like, yeah, you would have been great here 3 years ago.
That's right. That's right.
But ultimately, there was one of the exchanges, and this was when the OJ stuff was happening. One of the exchanges we were making, and he kicked me, and he made like a little mark on my leg. I mean, it wasn't like death or anything like that, but he made a little mark on my leg. The police were called. The neighbors were always calling the police when we were fighting, and the police call out, and they saw that mark on my leg, and that was the first time they arrested him. And because it was after OJ, I had no say in it. So before that, women always had to testify and press charges, and most women wouldn't do that. They're too afraid, or they love him, or whatever.
Mhm.
And after OJ, the laws changed where it took it out of the woman's hands. So it was out of my hands. By the police seeing the mark on me, they were able to press the charges. And that's where my story, I'm so very lucky because it ended there. He went to jail, and he decided that I wasn't worth him being in jail. Like, I was lucky he wasn't one of the super crazy ones, and he never physically hurt me again. And so I was super lucky, and because so many women die in the after experience where the man just won't give up no matter what. So I was fortunate in that. So back to how this all turns out so great. The very first stay in the shelter, we learned a lot of things. We're in a battered women's shelter. There's certain rules, there's certain thing they're trying to teach us. We had a lot of like chores and organization and counseling, and there was all these rules and regulations. And one of the things is you can't spank your kids. And I'm like, how am I going to discipline them then if I can't spank my kids? and it's so funny how it just doesn't connect, like violence and spanking and hitting and all that.
Yeah.
But there's a connection there. And so, they're like, well, you're in a shelter for violence, and we don't allow any violence, and hitting kids is violent. And so there's no spanking children in this shelter. And I'm like, well, you're going to have to help me then. And it turns out you get parenting classes when you're in a battered women's shelter. And I loved my parenting class teacher in there. She was a counselor. She would come in, she would teach us these classes, and I loved what I was learning. And one of the other counselors, because I said, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Like, what if he does this? I've got to spank him. What if she does that? I've got to spank her. And they're like, this one gal, Abby, she's like, come and get me and we'll talk about it. And so the first day it was like 7 times. It's like, Abby, she's doing this and this and this. I got to hit her now. She's like, let's calm down. Let's look at what's going on. Let's try to figure out something else. And every time we would talk about it, and she would help me come up with this great discipline idea that didn't involve spanking my child. It was something that helped them learn, that corrected their behavior, that built their self-esteem. And I was just so fascinated. So that first time I came out, even when I went back home, I got my neighbors together and we had a parenting breakfast club on Saturdays. And I hired Abby to come out, and we all chipped in $5 and we paid Abby to teach us a parenting class. And whoever's house it was at, we'd provide the coffee and donuts, and she would teach us some parenting things. So that's kind of where teaching parenting started for me. I made this parenting breakfast club. And then a few months later, we took a parenting course together. And one of our little times where we were trying to work it out, he and I signed up for this course, and it was a 5-week class. And he quit after the second week. He's like, I'm not going to that stupid parenting class. And that was when I was like, oh my gosh, I am never going to be able to parent the way that I want to parent with this man. Like, that was one of my big realizations about that relationship, that how it wasn't going to work, because he quit. Like, he wasn't willing to parent that way or anywhere near it. But I learned so much, and I loved what I learned. And once I got out, once I started getting back on my feet, I got a job. I was working as a receptionist at a law firm. I had subsidized childcare. I was, barely making it, but I was making it on my own.
Yep.
And I said, God, just give me work that I love, that makes a difference in the world, and lets me be home after school for my kids. Like, that was my dream, was to have flexibility so I could go on field trips and be there after school for my kids. Like, that was my image of what I wanted to be as a parent. And so it was a series of events that led to me getting training, teaching the parenting class. And that's what became my life's work. And so first they called me I was doing volunteer work for the domestic violence organization and child abuse and neglect. And they called me at one point and they said, how would you like to teach parenting classes and we'll pay you? And I was like, that'd be fun. And They sent us out and paid us like $10 an hour. I paid $8 an hour to somebody to watch the kids, and probably the government got the other two, but I loved the work. And so I got trained and I started my business, Positive Parenting, in July of 1994. And that's what I've been doing ever since, is teaching parenting classes. And it was a direct result of that experience. And so I always say that the biggest mistake I ever made was marrying my first husband. That was the biggest mistake I ever made, was marrying my first husband. But it was also the greatest gift, because out of it came my life's work. And so, I look back on the experience with gratitude, really. I mean, for everything that it brought me, and the self-awareness and who I became as a parent really was a result of that.
Friend of mine, Bird Baggett, says, don't give up before the blessings. And so you went through all that struggle, all them years, and to finally get the blessings, like you said, and your prayer was answered, that you're helping other people. And hopefully you got home before they got out of school so you can be with them.
I absolutely did. It was great. And, the nights that the kids were with their dad, that's when I taught. So I didn't really even have to get a lot of babysitters. It was a great way to make a living while I was raising my kids, to give me the flexibility that I wanted.
Now let's go back to many moons ago again. Okay. Now, you've been married, you've had your 3 children, this assaults and everything's going on. All right. Was there, and I've got to believe there was, and this would be hindsight.
Yes.
There had to have been signals before you got married that he was going to be maybe not abusive, but controlling would be the first issue. And then it led into other things. So looking back, did you realize that like I said, hindsight, and then you're going, boy, if I'd have woke up then, I wouldn't be where we wouldn't have to go through all this.
Absolutely. I mean, that was so much of what counseling provided me, right? Was just these little things. Like the night I met him at a bar. Like, that got to tell you something, right?
There you go. Hey, not to meet people in a bar is the worst thing in the world all the time, but you may want to do some more investigating on sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes.
And it was a bar that had pictures of people that had met at this bar and gotten married, and then later on it would have divorced. Like,
there you go. Yeah.
It was not good. But I met him that night. He came up and started talking to me, and I had a cute little like skirt and top on, and he actually put his hand on my rear end, and he's like, "Oh, nice," or something like that. And I thought, "Oh, how cute," right?
Oh, so yeah.
That was the event that we talked a lot about in counseling, and my counselor saying that wasn't cute. That was a violation. Like, that's not okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, huh? Like, that wasn't how I had been trained to think, right?
Yeah. He did not get permission to grab the caboose.
That's right.
He just took it among
himself. I laughed and took it as a compliment.
That's right, a compliment. Yes. Okay. Yeah, I can understand that, because both of you are during that time, and there's different ways of doing it. We're flirting and figuring out each other. And so he was pretty much flirting quick to figure out, and you were the giggly girl, like you said, taking as a compliment. I can understand all that. Today, though, some man go up and do that, they're going to get shot. And not to say they should get shot, but they definitely should be reprimanded, because you don't get in them personal spaces like that until you get to know them better, and somehow permission's given, however it is. It doesn't have to be a verbal contract, but we all know the game to play, which is acceptable and not acceptable. Yeah.
Yeah, and post that experience, Debbie, somebody would do that to me. I would never go out with them. Like that would be like, ew, stay away from that person, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Do
that
you
wasn't
do you think that maybe, of course, meeting him in the bar and everything like that, be pre that? Do you think maybe you had a low self esteem and low confidence, and this was some attention you're getting that's feeling good?
absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, that was very much the case.
Okay, yeah, yeah, because I can see that as well. Not to
Yeah.
say a very confident woman wouldn't have took it as the same thing 30 years ago, but if I can
Right. And
see, I can see if you're left. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, nobody looking at me would say, "Oh, she lacks confidence or she lacks self-esteem." But when you take everything, and again, this is, some pretty deep work I did in counseling, but looking at my childhood and like how much I was controlled by my father and how much, just how my experience was growing up, led me to being the way that I was and
Yes.
really not feeling that I could say no or that I could stick up for myself. I mean, I had been under the parents' thumb, for all those years and didn't ever really experience making decisions like what's right for Debbie. It's either rebel against authority or cave into authority because I have no choice. So I had, I was feisty, but not, not truly knowing what I needed or
Yes.
what was best for me.
Saying just meeting you now for the 21 minutes we've been on, plus the 3 or 4 before we started here, I would have never thought of you having a low self-esteem or confidence problem the way you're outgoing right now. And I'm glad that you found yourself over all those years and over all the counseling. And I'm sorry you had to go through the abuse, but like you said, it may have been a blessing in disguise to get you where
Totally.
you're at today. And so, yeah, but I don't know if you know, but I'm in a wheelchair. I got my neck broke playing football, and not that I ever wish it on anybody to get paralyzed. But looking back, I mean, I've had a good life, probably better than I would have had maybe beforehand. Who knows? To be able to do this podcast to help people get give a platform for you to get your story out to help no telling how many people out there in the future. And so, for me, if it wasn't for this, I don't know if I would be doing this. And so the only thing I regret, and I'm sure you would throw a piece of it in, is for me, I just wish that my mom and brothers didn't have to go through this with me. So like similar to you would wish your children didn't have to go through this with
Yeah,
you to get you where
absolutely.
you're at today. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And there's still effects of them. I mean, they're, 30, 32, and 36. And there's still things that we talk about. And, I can see things where it's like, wow, that was back from when your dad and I used to fight, that some results. And, so it's definitely, I wish, I mean, so like I trust kind of God, right? That all of our paths are the way they're supposed to be. And, we all do our life and we do the best with it. And they have done the best. And I've done the best I could too. Coming out of that, I think was the best thing I ever did for them in terms
mhm.
of role modeling. I did everything the best I could. And yeah, it would have been nice had they not had to experience that. Um, I mean, I think it wore on me too. Like, who would I have been otherwise? Yeah, I wouldn't have what I do, but I would have had something else. Who knows what it was? Or
Mhm.
maybe not. Maybe I would have gone down the tubes. Who knows? I don't
Well,
know.
and again, yeah, that I believe one reason we go through some struggle. I didn't say every struggle, but sometimes when we go through some tragedy, it's to teach us how strong we really are, and then we can use all this to help other people. And one reason I believe we're here is to help as many people as we can while we're here. So,
And I think that's so true. I remember when I got out of this, I was doing, I was not really big speaking gigs, but I would speak in front of a panel or I would do an article for the newspaper. I spoke for our domestic violence task force and some judges and people in the court systems, like as a victim survivor. And doing that work for me, it was the only thing that made my journey make sense because sometimes having experienced what I experienced, it made no sense to me. Like, I'm a smart person, I'm a good person, like all of that pain and all of that violence and the harm to my children. And sometimes if I wanted to go in the dumps and just like be like, poor me, I didn't, because if I could use my story to help somebody else, then it made it seem like there's a purpose here. There's a reason for it. And as long as I'm sharing with others, and if somebody else can get some inspiration or hope, or, you know, actually calling the hotline, like that's my big thing. Whenever somebody talks to me, it's like, call the hotline. Like,
get that little extra courage to finally dial that number. Yes.
Yes. And so just knowing my story may help somebody that's what keeps me from going into any regrets or be in the doldrums about it, or anything, any self-pity just can go away as long as I keep sharing my story.
Now, I've done other shows and none of them has used the domestic terrorists, but they'll use domestic assault or relationship abuse. I mean, they're using other words, which are really the same thing as what we're talking about. Okay. Now, if other people are coming in that because they're going to read this title that we're going to have on there about abusive relationships or whatever, when I get the title together, and they're going to come in now to another woman come in, what advice could you give them to get them on the right path now?
Definitely call the 800 number, and maybe you can search for the National Domestic Violence Hotline and post it in the show notes, because I think more than anything else, that's where there's skilled professionals that know how to talk to a person like me, that in that space of fear, unknowing, and not wanting to get out. So reaching out, I think the feeling of isolation and the way the abusers isolate you, it can make you think you're crazy and you think it's all your fault. And so any way that you can reach out to a safe place is going to be key, key.
They are master manipulators. So
yeah.
And the first thing they want to do, I wouldn't have done this if you wouldn't have knocked that ashtray off on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, so they're definitely a master manipulator. They know what they're looking for. They know how to hunt this down. I mean, they're predators to go after these type of women, that low self-esteem and low confidence, whatever. So, all right. So, so appreciate that to help them. Main thing is we'll put that number in the show notes.
Thank you.
As we get going. Yes, we'll put that in there. And so, wow. What can, now here's a question I was thinking while you were talking, come back to me. Do or maybe not what, do or maybe not have some type of relationship with the ex-husband. Now, I mean, because you still have the kids or the common denominators, whether they want to go see him or not. Do y'all ever talk anymore? This
is actually a super amazing success story. Like I said in the beginning, I felt, I literally live my life every day grateful I'm here, because he could have killed me back then. There was so many times where I thought I was going to die. And especially when I got out, that's when most women get killed, is after they leave. And so I was one of the very lucky ones. We went through 5 or 6 years of court battles and this and that and tough times. And then it mellowed out. And then I got remarried. And then it escalated again temporarily. He took me back to court to get more custody, and he lost custody because now I was married, and the court saw me as stable and gave us more custody. And then he befriended my husband, and then they kind of teamed up.
Uh-huh.
And so I didn't have to deal with him anymore. He could always deal with my husband. And we had a good little period there of being able to do the transitions and do everything right for the kids. And here's the kicker. So when my son was 16, we started having some problems with his behavior at home. He was excessive computer use and not listening. And at one point, my husband threw him up against the wall. And at that point, I'm like freaking out because, okay, here's violence again and whatever. And I'm like, we can't have this. We've got to figure something out. We called their dad, my ex, and said, will you help us with this? If we set a boundary that Michael has to not be violent, will you take him in if he chooses not to follow our rule? And he agreed. And so we invited him over. We sat down in a family meeting environment, and basically my ex saved our butts. So he was willing to take our son. My son said, yeah, I'll go live with dad. He lasted there 3 weeks. And then he decided to come back home. He's like, I'll follow the rules. So it wasn't all roses over at dad's.
There you go. That's right. So, all right. So, and you mentioned this earlier that the police took him and arrested him, locked him up for a little bit with that mark on your leg. And so you said that was pretty much an eye opening for him, that he wanted no more of that. So he kind of tamed himself around you as much as he could.
He did. And we ended up working out things for the kids. So then we were able to do stuff like graduations and school events and hockey and this and that. And then just this summer, one of my daughters got married, and we both walked her down the aisle together. Good. It was amazing. And yeah, I just was so proud of myself and of us. And to see 30 years later, like, we came this far. And you know, this is not, everybody can't have hope for this. Most of these don't turn out this way.
Oh, you're right. Yes.
You know, I attributed a lot to the work that I did. I mean, I did a huge amount of growth and communication work through the work that I learned to do with parenting. And so I really feel like I was taking the high road and practicing what I was teaching. And I feel like I was able to deflect a lot of that, and just grace of God as well, that this could turn out this way. And so, you know, I don't consider him a friend, like somebody I would call and befriend, but anything involving the kids, I have no problem chatting with him now.
All right, good. I'm glad he was able to mature and grow up as well. And so, I mean, did it take just being locked up a little bit there, or did he go and seek counseling afterwards?
It wasn't so much the counseling. I think it was time, and also losing custody that second time when I was married. I think that mellowed him out more than anything else. The fact that he quit fighting, and then stopping having to pay child support. He never liked paying child support. There
you go. Not that I have any children, but I think I would have a hard time writing that check too.
Yeah.
Even though I know it's supposed to help the children, I understand that, but it would be tough knowing that the wife is spending it on the kids, not me spending it on the kids.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I understand all that. So, all right. Well, this has been, I'm glad to hear it's so successful, but I'm like you, that's probably your success with the ex-husband and new husband. And did your ex-husband, did he ever remarried?
No, he never did. He's still alone, and probably a good thing.
Yeah. He's still got time. Maybe he's still growing enough so we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I'm sure your success story here is very rare compared to what's really going on out there.
Yes, I would say that. Yes, I would say absolutely. It's a very rare experience to have that much violence and be okay 30 years later.
Working with other women with your parenting that you're doing everything. I'm sure you can tell when a new one comes in how timid they are and not sure what to do, but watching them blossom as they're going through all these courses and their self-esteem's growing, it's got to be rewarding.
Yeah, and it's something that follows me around. Like, I'll be at the grocery store and somebody I don't know will just start telling me about their abuse, you know, or it's like that happens to me all the time. Like, I don't know, from nowhere. And I just feel like it's, you know, again, it's part of my, it's just part of me. It's my life. It's my experience. It's what I carry with me. So I'm there for them. Yeah.
It's your gift to share now.
Yeah.
So, all right, Debbie, appreciate you being on here. Boy, you provided a not a long, but a great, what happened, could happen, but how you just persevered through all this and was able to get the help that you needed. Children was able to get a better environment to grow in, and really enjoy listening to this. And I'm really fired up that you're helping other people to help them get out of this situation and help so they can have a better life.
Yeah. And that's what I love about teaching the parenting classes. It's just, parenting classes, the first week they come to my class, they think they're going to fix their kids, and they come back the second week and they're like, oh, this is about me, isn't it?
That's right. That's right. So, all right, Debbie. Hey, if you want to take a minute to get your social media, how people can get hold of you, if they want to maybe consult with you with your parenting, if you
Yeah,
want to
absolutely. So
push all
my
that
web,
out.
yeah, my website's positiveparenting.com. So it's very easy, positiveparenting.com. And on Instagram, I'm at Positive Parenting Debbie.
And I'll put those in the show notes as well.
Okay,
So,
great.
and thank you for being here, man. It's a blessing to hear from someone who has succeed and gotten through. Again, maybe not the success that you've had, but at least they've gotten out of the situation and moving, having a better life is just great to hear it. So,
Yeah.
all right, if you know, David, there's people struggling out there today, and if you could leave us with a positive message to help them get through today, that'd be a blessing in itself.
Yeah, your life has purpose and meaning, and whatever you might be going through right now, there's a reason for it, and you can pull through this, and you can come through it out the other end, and you have a gift to give the world, and you'll find it.
I tell you, I can't remember the woman's name. Maybe it was, I hate to say Patty, but I don't know if it was Patty or someone else. I'm sorry if I missed wrong, but she made a comment, and it just stuck with me ever since she said it. That her gift was like a wrapped in sandpaper.
Oh,
You know, so to get through all of that with your sandpaper, your thumb and fingers, going through that to finally get to your gift. And
yeah.
yes, so there was Patty, if it's not you, I'm sorry. To the other one, I will research you back and then use you the correct the next time.
So don't ever give up. That's the biggest message. Don't ever give up. Just know that around the corner that there's something there.
There's something there waiting for you, and it's going to be better than what you, as Dave Ramsey would say, better than you deserve.
That's
So,
right.
all right, Debbie, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your
Thanks so much.
valuable time with us
Mhm.
and providing the inspiration, motivation, some education, some hope, and if there anyone else that's coming in, be sure to share this out. There's someone that can use this information. Again, you don't have to go through a domestic abuse. You don't have to be a spinal cord injury, but the hope of overcoming is there for everybody to share and use. Woo! This has been good. Hey, everybody, do something today, tomorrow, something next week that's going to help you persevere past your paralysis.